If you want to be an astronaut, you must first understand that the real goal was never the sky. It all begins when you're 8 years old, lying on a blanket in your backyard on a clear night. Your father points out a moving light in the sky and tells you it's a space station full of people. And you feel a tightness in your chest, a feeling you can't yet describe. And with the unshakable certainty that only a child can possess, you decide that one day you'll leave this planet. Yet you have no idea what that decision will truly cost you. You spend your childhood taking apart old radios and reassembling them incorrectly, memorizing the names of every planet and moon with an atmosphere, reading scientific books on orbital mechanics, which you don't fully understand yet, in putting what you've learned into practice. While other kids ask for bicycles for their birthdays, you ask for a telescope, and your confused but supportive family saves up money and gets you one anyway. You struggled in school in ways no one expected, not because you lacked intelligence, but because the curriculum bored you. That is, until a teacher noticed the physics book you were reading under your desk during a lesson on a completely different subject. That teacher began quietly leaving more challenging problems on your desk without saying a word. Years later, you realized that this was the first of dozens of people who had set aside a part of their lives to help you reach a goal without expecting anything in return. By majoring in aerospace engineering or physics, you're choosing a career built on a completely remote possibility. Because the astronaut corps doesn't accept vague aspirations, it demands master's degrees and specialized knowledge. You'll spend your college years watching your classmates go to parties while you sit alone in the lab at midnight, crunching data you don't quite understand yet, because you've long since decided that sleep is a flexible matter. But this is not. You thought things would be easy after graduation, but they weren't, because becoming an astronaut isn't a career path waiting for you at the end of your degree. It's one of the most competitive selection processes on the planet. Thousands of exceptionally qualified people apply for a handful of positions that open up only once every few years, and that's why, in the meantime, you're building a career that keeps you circling around your goal without ever quite reaching it. Some of you become test pilots, flying aircraft you've never flown before, entrusting your lives to machines that could break down at any moment, because the selection committee has always valued people who can remain calm in an environment that could kill them. Some of you spend winters in Antarctica or months aboard submarines, developing that quiet, isolated competence that a very select jury perceives as exactly the profile they're looking for. All of you, no matter the path you take, spend your 20s and 30s building a resume aimed at a goal that most people around you aren't even aware exists. You apply and are rejected, apply again years later, and are rejected once more, because the competition is so fierce that even exceptional candidates are rejected time and again before being accepted, if they are accepted at all. You apply through a portal that receives tens of thousands of applications for a class of 10 or 12 people. This ratio is lower than that of just about any lottery you can think of. You can't tell anyone in your circle, not even your family, that you've applied, because explaining a rejection later would be unbearable. You go back to your normal life with no expectations until months later, you receive an email asking if you're available for a phone call. Your hands shake so much that you have to set your phone down on the table just to read the email twice. Most of the year is spent taking oral, written, and practical exams. Medical examinations far more comprehensive than anything you've experienced so far. Psychological evaluations designed to identify any and all potential cracks that might emerge over time from being forced to live with the same 5 people for 6 months. And panel interviews with people who have been to space themselves and can tell within minutes whether you're just acting confident or are actually confident. You'll be flown to a facility for the final round of evaluations along with a small group of other finalists. You're all extraordinary individuals. You're aware that most people in the room will be eliminated, and you'll be under observation during mealtimes and your free time for a week, because the committee wants to know not only whether you can do the job, but also whether anyone would want to be locked up with you in a metal tube for half a year. You go home and wait. The weeks feel like an eternity. You constantly refresh your email, telling yourself you're at peace with whatever happens, yet as you lie awake at 3 in the morning, you can't find peace with anything. Until one ordinary afternoon, your phone rings with an unfamiliar number. A voice you've never heard before asks if you want to be an astronaut, and before the sentence is even finished, you say, yes. You hang up and sit in complete silence for a few minutes because the goal around which your entire adult life has revolved has impossibly ceased to be a goal and become reality. You're joining the program as a candidate, and this was the first step on a challenging journey because being selected doesn't make you an astronaut. It makes you a candidate who must complete approximately 2 years of training to earn the right to be called an astronaut. Even if you're not a pilot by profession, you'll learn to fly high-performance jets because flying instills the ability to make decisions under pressure, a skill that can't be taught any other way. And the first time you sit in the backseat of a training plane, you'll feel your organs pressing against your spine. Nausea and excitement fill you in equal measure. You're dropped into the open sea in a simulation capsule and expected to escape and survive using only the equipment strapped to your body. As you tread water for hours, instructors silently assess whether there are any signs of panic on your face. You're sent into a desolate wilderness with minimal supplies because if a spacecraft veers off course, it might land in a hostile environment, and your instructors need to know that you can keep yourself and your crew alive for days in a forest or desert until a rescue team arrives. You spend weeks learning a language that has almost nothing in common with your own. Since international crews train and fly together, you study spacecraft documents written in a foreign alphabet and fail your first exam. For the first time since you were selected, you genuinely feel the fear that you might be eliminated after all the effort you put into getting here. You train underwater in a pool large enough to submerge a full-scale mock-up of a station module. You wear a suit that weighs hundreds of pounds on land but becomes eerily weightless underwater, and you practice tasks nonstop for 6 or 7 hours until your hands cramp permanently inside the pressurized gloves, because the only way found so far to prepare the human body for the harsh realities of working outside a spacecraft is to make the training itself equally grueling. You learn robotics. You operate a remote-controlled manipulator arm with 3-dimensional precision that requires hundreds of hours of practice because there is no gravity in space to tell you which way is down, and misjudging a maneuver by even a few centimeters could cause one piece of extremely expensive equipment to collide with another. Since there is no hospital or means of evacuation, you must treat the crew and keep them alive using your own resources. You undergo training with all your heart, hoping you'll never have to use this knowledge on a friend. You complete the selection process and are officially appointed as an astronaut. A small ceremony, a photo, a badge. You think you're ready for your first mission, but the spacecraft's capacity stands in the way. There are always more qualified astronauts than there are seats on the spacecraft. You now enter a strange cycle of waiting. You undergo continuous training to maintain your qualifications for a mission with an undetermined date. While waiting, you watch as classmates from your own recruitment class are assigned to flights, and you sincerely try not to harbor resentment. Most of the time you succeed, but sometimes you don't. In the meantime, you work on mission support duties. You sit at a console in the control room and relay instructions to the astronauts currently in orbit. You hear your own voice echoing out into space, and you suddenly realize with crystal clarity just how much responsibility lies in every single word you send. Years pass, you marry, or you do not. You have children, or you do not, and if you do, you learn early that explaining a 6-month absence to a 5-year-old requires a kind of honesty most parents never have to develop, and you record video messages before you leave for occasions you might miss, videos you hope with everything in you they will never actually need to watch. The call finally comes, a real assignment, a real launch date, and training intensifies again. Mission specific this time. Endless simulations of every subsystem failure that has ever occurred or been imagined. because a crew rehearses catastrophe so thoroughly that when something eventually does go wrong in orbit, your body responds with trained procedure instead of raw panic. In the weeks leading up to launch, you move into the quarters where the crew lives. You're quarantined from the general public to ensure you don't arrive in space with even the slightest cold, because an illness that might cause you to take a day off on Earth could jeopardize the entire mission in space. On the morning of the launch, surrounded by technicians who have checked every seal multiple times, you put on your suit and walk past your family toward the spacecraft. You wave from behind your visor. You can't hug them, and you can't actually say what you want to say because there's a schedule, and the countdown doesn't pause for anyone's emotions. During the final checks, you lie on your back for hours reviewing the procedures you've rehearsed hundreds of times, and in the final moments, for an instant, your mind involuntarily drifts back to a child lying on a blanket watching a single light pass across the dark sky. And you can barely grasp that you are now the light that another child will watch. The engines roar beneath you with an intensity that no simulator can fully replicate. As the vehicle tears through the atmosphere, you feel a constant crushing force pressing you into your seat. And then, after minutes that feel like both an instant and an eternity, the engines stop and your body suddenly, shockingly becomes weightless. A loose checklist floats gently upward in front of your face, and with a clarity that no part of your years of training could have fully prepared you for, you realize you have truly left the planet. You spend your first days in orbit fighting a nausea unlike anything you have known, your inner ear completely confused about which way is down because down no longer exists, and you adapt within days and something in you shifts permanently because you now live inside a spacecraft traveling around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour, watching a sunrise and a sunset every 90 minutes, your body's sense of time completely detached from the rhythm it spent an entire life learning. You float past a window during a rare, quiet moment and see the whole curve of the Earth at once, the atmosphere, a thin, blue line so fragile-looking it makes your chest hurt, no visible borders in anywhere, no evidence of the conflicts that structure life below, and you understand the way every astronaut before you has tried and failed to fully explain afterward why so many of them return changed in ways they can never quite put into words for people who have not seen it themselves. You are assigned your first spacewalk, and the night before you barely sleep, running emergency procedures over and over in your head because leaving the pressurized safety of a vehicle means floating in a suit that is the only thing standing between you and instant death in a vacuum, with temperatures swinging hundreds of degrees between direct sunlight and shadow. You open the hatch, and the moment you push yourself out into open space, holding a handrail with the entire planet spinning silently beneath your boots, you feel a fear so pure that your training alone keeps your hands moving through the checklist instead of freezing completely and somewhere in the middle of a 6-hour task list. Your fear dissolves into something closer to disbelief because you are, quite literally, a human being floating freely above the world, tethered by a single cable, and nothing in your entire life prepared you for how enormous and how silent it actually is. Your mission extends for months, and isolation compounds slowly, a low background hum of homesickness that never fully goes away, made worse by video calls with your family that are wonderful and devastating in equal measure, your children changing visibly between calls in ways you are not present for, birthdays and school events happening without you while you watch a recording later from far overhead. Your body begins deteriorating in ways doctors on the ground track constantly. Bone density dropping, muscle mass shrinking despite 2 hours of mandatory exercise every day on equipment, bolted to the walls, your cardiovascular system adapting to weightlessness in ways that will make your return to gravity a genuine physical ordeal. The mission eventually ends and you strap back in for re-entry, a descent through the atmosphere that generates so much heat, the outside of your vehicle glows, deceleration, crushing your weakened body after months of weightlessness, and when you finally settle onto solid ground or splash into open ocean, you are physically unable to stand on your own, carried out by a recovery team, while gravity, the very force you spent your entire childhood dreaming of escaping, now feels like an almost unbearable weight pressing down on every limb. You spend weeks relearning to walk normally, your bones and muscles slowly rebuilding under careful supervision. And the entire time, you are also processing something far harder to rehabilitate: the quiet psychological adjustment of having seen the planet from outside itself and now being asked to care again about the small, specific problems of ordinary daily life. Years later, you are asked whether you would fly again, this time farther than any human has traveled in half a century. And despite everything it has already cost you, the isolation, the physical toll, the birthdays missed, the fear that lived permanently just beneath your training, you say yes again, almost instantly, because the child on that blanket never actually stopped being part of you. He just learned decades later exactly what the dream was going to demand in return and decided every single time that the answer was still worth it. And somewhere right now, on an ordinary evening in an ordinary town, a child is lying on their back in a backyard watching a single light cross a dark sky, feeling something tighten in their chest they have no words for yet, deciding with total unshakable certainty that they are going to leave this planet one day with absolutely no understanding of the decades of rejection and isolation and physical punishment that decision is going to demand of them, or what it might feel like after everything to finally watch the Earth disappear behind them into the dark.